Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Dear friends, this is the third lecture in terms of this subject of Islamic finance and the riba. And as you know, I took a long approach, and first two lectures were mostly about general principles and telling us how we would approach this subject. So if anyone has not watched those lectures, I strongly recommend that you go through first and the second lecture so that you could understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing and how I am doing. Otherwise, it might be confusing and you may not get the whole or the full message. So in this lecture, what I am going to do is start directly with riba. And like I stated at the end of my last lecture, that I would make certain observation first with you about riba and some statements about riba which are general understanding and historically correct. So the first thing about this is riba. This is a word I'm using because this is the word that comes, Arabic word that comes in the Quran and the Hadith. Now, riba is an economic concept. First message to you is that riba is an economic concept, just like zakat as in Islam is an economic concept. So that's the first thing to understand. The second is riba is a very old problem. It is, as far as history is concerned, we know that people have written about riba centuries ago. Aristotle wrote about riba, and he was arguing against riba. So you can imagine that the Greek civilization even was talking about riba. Romans dealt with riba. And in my book, I mention all that history, but bottom line is that it's not just Islamic problem or concept, or even with Abrahamic faith, like with Jewish, Christians, and Muslim. It is universal problem and historically very old, as old as human beings have been dealing with each other. Now, historically, it was considered a very bad thing. Religious or non-religious, all circles took it as a very bad thing. Question is why? Why was it considered very bad thing? For that, you have to understand what used to happen. What used to happen to a lot of people. See, the society now is very, very different, and it's difficult to understand what used to happen even just few hundred years ago. But just as a reflection, I would tell you what used to happen, that and in a way, that process, what I'm going to describe, was happening even in pre-Islamic time in Arab. And that was known to early Muslims, and that has been described by Imam Malik Raziallahu Ta'ala anhu in his book Al-Muwatta. I'm so thankful to him, really extremely thankful to him, that he mentioned those few lines in his book, in which he states that according to their understanding, he described in his book that the riba for them was something which is the same as I'm going to tell you, that what was the historical concept of riba. Historical concept of riba was that if somebody needed money, let's say, and let's say hypothetically somebody borrowed $10,000 from someone, the other person would give $10,000 happily because that's maybe he has money, or second, that's the way he does his business. He would give that money to the other guy who needed this $10,000. Now, this person who got $10,000, he was supposed to return it after 3 months, and the one who lent $10,000 stated to him that if you return me back after 3 months, so that's fine. You can just give me $10,000 back. That would be fine. So, with these terms, historically, people borrowed. Now, a lot of time, of course, if somebody has $10,000, he would just return it, or she would just return it, and that would be the end of it. But frequently, what happened that people did not have those $10,000, or at least not the whole amount. Let's say, for explanation, this person did not have $10,000. So what would happen? The lender's servant or agent or whoever would come to him, or he himself would come and say, "Where is my money?" And now the borrower does not have that money. So he would say, "I don't have it." So the lender would simply say, "No problem. That's okay. I give you 3 more months, but instead of 10,000, now it's going to be 14,000. You have to return it." Now, the borrower has no choice. There is no authority to check anything. Nobody can tell the lender that this is too much or too little. Whatever the lender says, it's going to be the verdict, because the borrower is stuck. Now, the borrower says, "Okay, now 3 more months, he has to come up with 14,000. Now, 3 more months pass by. The other guy comes back. And let's assume that he still does not have those $10,000, because he used it for whatever reasons. And now the lender says, "Okay, no problem." He tells him, "No problem. I'll give you 3 more months. But in 3 months, now you are going to return $18,000, or even $20,000, really. That would be the right example. You say, now it's $20,000. Now, of course, the borrower is afraid, scared, what is going to happen, but again, he or she does not have a choice. There is no authority, there is nobody, and the lender, and the whole system. If you say there is a tribal authority, well, the rich people in the tribe are all doing this, so they don't care. So everybody is abusing the system. So now it becomes 20,000, and 3 more months. 3 more months gone by, lender comes back and asks for his money, and this unfortunate guy does not have $20,000. So now the lender says, "Listen, this is enough. Now I have to do something else. It is clear that you would not be able to pay back." So if he had any property or animals or home or land or farm, he would say, "Well, that is mine, whatever." And the price of that would be dictated by those people who are controlling everything. So this guy would lose everything, his livelihood, home, and whatever. But a lot of people did not have any property. Even those were given money. Why? For different reasons. And a lot of people who had property, the property sold, would not be able to pay that 20,000. It would pay only the fraction of it, and rest would still be the same. So now the lender would say, "Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to work for me. You and your family, your wife and your children have worked for me until this money is paid off." And who is going to determine their salary? This guy. The salary would be so little that they could work all their lives and they would never be able to pay off, because this original money would keep on increasing and they would not be able to pay off. In fact, they would die and their children would not be able to pay off. And according to tribal customs or whatever, the children would be enslaved and their children would be enslaved. So this is how people were enslaved historically, even in reasonable places, people were enslaved and they continued to work for people, and it was almost impossible for them to buy their freedom or get out of that enslavement. So, as you can imagine, this was an extremely abusive system. That's why Aristotle was so much against it. That's why historically people were against it. So, they were in history, people tried to control this practice a little bit, but not very successfully. It was still going on, and in pre-Islamic Arabia, it was still going on. It was still being practiced, if not enslavement, even the rate they charged was exceedingly high. So even Prophet Rasul Akram's own family was involved in this business, if we could call it a business, of course. So this is historical concept of riba, that the reason societies and all people were so much against it, as you can understand why Islam is so much against it. Now, next thing to uh, to tell you is that riba is categorically forbidden in Islam. No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubts. No wishy-washy. Completely forbidden in Islam. Interestingly, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about different sins and different wrongdoings, including we talked about khamr, which is very, very bad. So what are we told? Rijisum min amale shaitan, very bad, satanic acts. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fajtanibu, stay away from them. That's all. Stay away from them. Of course, that is a clear instruction, stay away from them. But when we compare that to riba, the situation is entirely different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that if anybody is dealing with riba, he or she is taking a war against him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Prophet. Can you imagine that anybody can even think about that? So the total concept is entirely different. Riba is considered so bad that it's like you are starting a war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which would mean that if you do that, then nothing you do is going to work. Your system will collapse. You would never see peace. You would never see prosperity. You would never see progress in your society. So naturally, just like if a society, of course, lying and stealing and adultery, these are wrong things, right? So if a society has too much stealing and lying or drugs, then you cannot assume that that society would be peaceful and prosperous. That society would be suffering. That's a logical conclusion. If a society has too much lying, stealing, and drugs, adultery, they would be in trouble. They would be in trouble in terms of peace and prosperity and safety. Similarly, riba, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared so major problem, if a society has riba, that society is not going to be peaceful, not prospering, not progressing. So these are just logical conclusions. And if you really understand riba, you can easily see that all over the globe right now. Wherever there is peace and prosperity, you would see that there is less riba, and wherever there is opposite of that, then there is more riba. This brings us to another concept about riba. Riba is a wrong thing, it's a sin. But just like any other sin, it can never be completely eliminated. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do it, but I'm just telling you the simple observation in history and evidence is that sins can never be completely eliminated. In a very, very, very peaceful society, there are going to be crimes. they're going to be stealing. But society overall is peaceful. Similarly, if somebody says that we can remove many other sins from any society, that cannot happen. We can only control it, minimize it. Similarly, riba is impossible to completely eliminate. And again, I would tell you that if you really understand what riba is, you would understand what I'm saying. Some people think that if they would just, let's say, in a country like Pakistan, if they, with a stroke of pen, they would sign a paper saying that the interest does not exist in Pakistan anymore, that means they are saying the riba is gone from Pakistan. They are completely mistaken. They do not understand what riba is. So riba can only be controlled and minimized, but it can never be completely removed. I would even make an argument that riba for a person, a single person, is the same thing. That a person would try his or her best to stay away from riba, but it would be sometimes very, very difficult to do it. Of course, that doesn't mean that we should deal with riba. What I'm saying is that that's the way it is. It is like any other sin. And same goes for a family or a society or a country. So these are things we should understand first. Next very important subject about riba is that riba is a different kind of sin. Riba comes in what we call hukuk al-ibad. We are told we are required to pray 5 times a day, pay zakat, fast, hajj if we could do it, all these things. Now, these are matters between an individual and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If one prays or does not pray, that's a matter between person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person doesn't pray or doesn't pay zakat and does not fulfill basic article of faith, that's between him and or her and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by doing that, meaning not fulfilling his or her responsibility as a Muslim, it makes no difference whatsoever to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just absolutely does not make any difference. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated in the Quran, it makes no difference to him. Basically, if you do it, it's your benefit. If you don't do it, it's your fault. You are doing zulm on your own nafs. That's the way it is described, meaning you are harming yourself. Riba is different. Riba is a matter between two individuals, or at least two individuals are involved, between one person or a group or two groups, or as you can imagine, it's a matter between people. And the people don't have to be Muslims. They could be Muslim, non-Muslim, or non-Muslim, non-Muslim. Riba is a matter between people. So its impact is direct on other person. If riba is involved and the riba's impact is going to be negative, its impact, negative impact, is direct on the other person or the other party. That's a very, very important point, because of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so much against riba, that it has direct impact on other people. Now, that's an important distinction. And its impact, by the way, is same if those groups or those people are Muslim or non-Muslim. If you understand riba properly, it is a problem for all. It's a universal problem. Of course, Islam or Quran and Hadith describe riba in a more comprehensive way, and we would go into that. But its impact, negative impact, is same. It has same negative. If riba is practiced in Pakistan, which is supposed to be a Muslim country, it would have same negative impact, versus if riba is practiced in any non-Muslim country, same negative impact. So if riba is there, it would be negatively impacting that society. And if riba is not there, it would be positively impacting that society. Very important understanding to make. Now, with these few things, I would go into an example. And for sake of understanding, the riba is a matter which, as you know, the finance is a complicated subject, and there are a lot of instruments of finance where this riba could be applicable. But for sake of understanding, I would use example of home financing to understand and have our discussion about riba, home financing, how a home is financed. And that's what I'm going to discuss. So for someone who does not understand how home is financed, I'll provide a brief overview. And when I say so, this is the way it is financed in America. And in most of the societies who are similar to America, the system is about the same. Now, imagine this, that there is a person who wants to buy a home. Now, there is another person who builds home. He's a builder, he builds home. And this person needs a home. He wants to buy it. Now he goes to the other person and likes a home this person has built and wants to buy it. Now this person, the builder, says that the price of this home, let's say it is $500,000, $500,000. That's the price of this home. That's the market price. And he says, you can check around, and that's a fair price. So this guy who wanted to buy a home, of course he wants to buy. As the builder says, if you bring 500,000, give me 500,000, house is yours. In most cases, people do not have that kind of money. Of course, there are some rich people and they can just write a check for 500,000, live in that home, and lecture everyone that that you people are dealing with riba and I'm not dealing with riba. I'm misunderstanding what is happening. Anyway, so in most cases, people do not have that kind of money. So now the person who wants to buy the house is stuck. But try to understand, the builder is also stuck. The builder has built a house, he wants to sell it, and the buyer doesn't have the money. So the whole system is stuck in a way. So the system, because if you look at the house, to build a house, you need concrete and bricks and wood and nails and windows and insulation and machinery and a lot of things and a lot of services, plumbing, electrician, this and that. A lot of people, a lot of businesses are really designed, they are working to make sure a house is built. House is not just built by one person in an old way by just taking mud and making walls like that. Houses are not built that way anymore. So anyway, this house is built and a lot of people are actually helping to make that house built. Now, so the builder wants to sell this house so that he could pay off all those people. And let's assume that out of this $500,000, he has to pay off $350,000 to all those people who put their services to build that house. And the builder himself, he would make $150,000 out of this $500,000 house. So unless this house is sold, he cannot start another project. He's stuck because he has to pay off previous people, and he also has to run his own household out of that 150. So the whole system is stuck. Now, what may be the solution for this problem? Some people who believe that a loan could only be interest free, their version would be that the builder should give this guy a break and give him the house 500,000, and he should pay it off in next 30 years or 20 years. Half a million houses average person would pay only really in 30 years. Even if it is in 10 years, that's a long duration. That's People think they are proposing that solution when they are saying that that loan has to be interest free. When they talk about interest free loan, that's what they're talking about. That the builder should give this guy half a million. Well, why would a builder do that? Because this guy would pay him in 30 years. That does not solve any problem. All the people who helped to build that house, they are not getting paid. The builder himself, his own household is not running. He cannot build another house. The whole system is stuck. So that is one logical problem. The other logical problem is and this is where I say that our people in Muslim societies are struggling, have always struggled with this concept, this fundamental concept. When you're asking this guy to give you half a million, even interest-free loan, then that is injustice to this party. The builder, it is injustice to the builder. People simply don't understand that and ignore that fact that is injustice to this builder. Now, the justice would be that some kind of arrangement has to be made between these two guys, that this trade that is going to happen is just for both people. It has to be just for both people. Now, in old days, when I talk about riba, if we take that time, the builder would be the only one designing all the terms, and he would give that house in so bad terms that in 2 or 3 years, the borrower would be stuck, the builder would take away the house, and his livelihood, and even worse. But none of that happens now. Anyway, we will go into that later. But what I'm saying is that in old days, these terms were different. Now the terms are different. So in this example, as you note, that the system is stuck if we believe that loan has to be interest-free, loan has to be free per se. So this is one logical problem with this scenario. Now, the question is, why they think that the loan has to be free? Fundamentally, that's a question. Why they came up with this idea that the loan has to be free? You cannot charge anything on loan. Where did this idea come from, for example? Well, I can tell you that I'm not the only one. People have researched on this. First of all, there is no such instructions in the Quran about it. Let me say it one more time. There is no such instructions in the Quran that the loan has to be free or interest-free, whatever the word we want to use it. Yes, Quran is very, very clear that the riba should not be there, but we will talk about that, what riba is. We are here only talking about that there is no such instructions in the Quran or even in the Hadith. So there actually both Quran and Hadith on this subject are quiet, silent, meaning there is no instruction that it is allowed and there is no instruction it is not allowed. Both sides are silent. What is there is following. What is there is following. That if somebody borrows money and is unable to pay it back on time, then give him more time. That's one. Second, if he or she is not able to pay, so you can take his whatever you can, meaning his possession, sell it out, and then if something is left, then forgive him. considered as charity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He likes people who do charity. So that doesn't mean that that transaction, that action that that person was not able to pay was just. It was still unjust. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that forgive him and He would take care of the one who is forgiving, and He is more merciful and He's very generous, and He would give the lender from sources he or she would not comprehend. That is all true. But that system is useful, functional for private loans between families, friends. That principle cannot run an enterprise or a country or a society. It cannot happen. Though I would later explain to you that the modern banking systems, like in America, home financing system, has been using exact same principles, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated, that if people are not able to pay, forgive them. Same thing happens in US too, but in a different level, in a different way. Exact same thing. People have learned this, though we are supposed to do it because Quran and Hadith say so. But as these are common sense things, people have learned it anyway. Maybe they have read Quran and Hadith, and that's why they are doing it. But what I'm saying is that you cannot expect from this builder that he would just give this guy $500,000 worth of house or loan, and nothing would happen. It would just, the whole system would collapse. Now, everybody knows that what I'm talking about is true. The system would collapse. Even those people who so-called make Islamic banks an Islamic financial system, they know that too. So, question is what solution they have come up with for this. Their solution is very, very interesting if you look at it. Their solution is very interesting. To explain that, let me give you an example, maybe a couple of examples first to talk to you about what they do. And it is very important to listen to this, the story I'm making up. The thing is, in fact, maybe before I do that, I should talk about the bank, the role of bank in this. So I talk about the builder and this guy. Now the problem is, builder does not have money and the guy does not have money. Builder has the house. So somebody has to come up with money. So either this person who wants the house, he has to go to some friend to buy $500,000 to buy a house. Well, that, as you imagine, is not going to happen. It's very rare if that would happen, but in most cases that is not a possibility. So what happens in US is that there is an in-between entity called a bank. Now, bank is an entity who has the money. Consider that bank or a group of people or even a single people, that entity has the money. So this entity says to these guys, okay, I will pay off the builder $500,000, so the builder is fine, he can go on with his business. Now the entity or the bank who gave the money, now that entity is dealing with this guy who owns the house. And of course, money is not free. So again, I'm coming back to the same point that some people believe that the loan can only be interest-free. Islamic loan can only be interest-free, meaning you cannot charge anything on top of the loan. That's why some people translate riba as excess amount, meaning anything charged on the loan. So people say that that is un-Islamic. So if that is un-Islamic, you are saying that the bank should give him $500,000 for nothing. So it has multiple problems. First of all, bank has no interest in doing that. Number two, this guy is going to pay bank off in 10, 20, or 30 years. Well, the bank can invest that money somewhere else and make a lot of money. Why would bank do that? That's another thing. Third thing is, value of money decreases most of the time. Sometimes increases, but most of the time. Anyway, it can change. Value of money can change drastically. People who live in Pakistan know it very well. So if somebody is giving you $500,000 today, next year the real value of that money might be 25% less. So the person who gave you $500,000, even if you return the same amount, the person is still losing. So as you can imagine, there are so many illogical things in this. So these are illogical things in this understanding of riba. That if we believe that the riba is excess amount on a loan, then we come up with these illogical things. That bank is going to lose by giving you money, or any person is going to lose by giving you money, and that's not going to work. Builder is going to lose, his whole business would be stuck. If we do that, that is not going to happen. So the whole system is stuck. And people are clearly aware of that. People who so-called design Islamic bank, they are aware of that. So then the question is, what is their solution? So the solution they provide is very interesting. So explain to you that solution. Imagine there is a market, and in that market there are 10 different shops, and these different shops are selling mangoes. Every shop is selling mangoes. And let's say, for the sake of this example, that the mango is being sold, let's say $10 or $5 a pound. Let's say $5 a pound, and all the different shops are selling mangoes. Now, for this example, I would also have to tell you that long time ago, hundreds of years ago, mango is an old fruit. It's been grown for centuries. Long time ago, what used to happen, that the people who grew mangoes, mango farmers, they used to put stuff, chemicals, this, that, in their farm or trees. And that was very bad. They learned that when people ate those mangoes, they got sick, and the crop was bad, and the mango smell was bad, and the shape was bad, and the color was bad, whatever. But after doing it for a while, they learned that those practices were wrong. So they have all learned that those practices were wrong, so they slowly and gradually stop those practices. But some people would still now then would do it, but most of them stopped those practices, and now nobody was involved in those bad practices. So the mangoes that were available were mostly free of that practice. So they were healthy, good to eat, no problem, wholesome mangoes. So now there are 10 shops in the town, and they all are selling mangoes. They're all doing well, $5 a pound. What happens one day? In that market, another shop opens up. And this shop has a different type of sign, and on that sign it says organic mangoes. Let's, for the sake of explanation or this example, the shop says organic mangoes, and this shop is selling it at $7 a pound. Now, there are some people in that town who are very self-conscious. They don't want to take any mistake. They don't want to feed anything to their children that would be not right. They are very concerned about their health. So what they do is they start buying mangoes from this organic shop. Organic shop is also doing business slowly and gradually. Customers are increasing, and rest of the shop owners are just perplexed. What is happening? Because they know the mangoes are same. But it's an open competition. Anybody can do anything. So they are mostly quiet, and that's what is happening. Until one day, a person like me who get curious, and I told you that fikr starts with being curious. You have to be curious. So that person gets curious, and he starts collecting information. So what he does, he does his own research. He goes back and find out what is happening, where are these people getting mangoes, how this is this and how this is organic, all that. He looks into that, and what he finds with his quite simple research, that there is actually the same farms which exist outside the town, and all these mango shop owners are buying mangoes from them, and this guy is also buying mangoes from them. He's just putting it as organic. So that's a surprise to him, and he makes a little bit of noise, but nobody listens to him because so-called the people who are promoting organic, they are very loud and they say, no, 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 this is different. Anyway, a fuss is created a little bit. So now the people who are this owner of organic shop, they make their first scheme, I would use the word scheme, the first scheme was exposed, so they are got weakened. So what they do is they come up with another scheme. What they do is they talk to a very popular, unknown, well-known gardener in that town. And that guy is very respected by everybody. They talked to him and somehow convinced him that he is going to be making sure that the mangoes who reach to their shop are organic. Well, he must have thought, what is this? What is for me in this, all this, whatever arrangement they made, fee or whatever arrangement they made, that is remained between them. But what started to happen is that now there is a gardener who stamps mangoes that this one is organic and the other, of course, are not. Now the company, the organic, that shop, they started advertising that our mangoes are organic certified. By who? By this person who is known to everyone, and everybody respects him. People have no problem, and that goes on. This is the model right now of Islamic banking when it comes to home financing. Islamic bank is providing you same money or same mangoes that which comes from similar same institutions like banks or investors or whatever, like mangoes were coming from the same farms. Now they are coming with same conditions as everyone else, but they are being either labeled as organic, or even worst cases, they are almost always more expensive too. So there are two problems. One, there is deception, and I will talk about that later. And the second, there is harm to the customer for no reason. So these two things are happening. This is what Islamic banks are doing with home financing right now, despite whatever claims they made. Of course, I told you that the money, like mangoes, money doesn't grow on trees like mangoes do, but money comes from either investors or banks or whoever provides the money. They get the same money with similar terms, and they just label it differently. Now, that's the perspective of Islamic Bank. I would go into more detail later why these things are happening, and that is even more important to understand. But we also have to understand what is the perspective of the gardener. That's a very interesting question. That, okay, the shop owner was doing all this, that explains Islamic bank's perspective, which is a shop in terms of other shops. But what is the perspective of the gardener? So to explain to you perspective of gardener, I'll give you a different example. Now, this video is now 45 minutes. I think this is more than enough for one video. I would really start the next video at this point where I would start with perspective of the gardener. It would increase your curiosity at least to go through the next lecture. And then we will continue discussion about why these things are happening the way they are happening. And part of the reason is that my mouth is getting dry and my speech is getting cranky. So I hope that you would come back and listen to the next part of this lecture, which would be lecture 4. This is I'm finishing lecture number 3, and inshallah we will continue with the next lecture. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us on the right path. Assalamu alaikum.